Hello, this is your brain on drugs, and this is the punk rock psychiatrist. And that was "Story of My Life" by Social Distortion. So that's an older one. I think that's from the '80s. And I picked "Story of My Life" because if you listen to the whole song, he kind of talks about how he had a difficult time in school, didn't really enjoy it, had a hard time with the girls, just um, kind of struggled. And I kind of think of like folks with ADHD as kind of having those same kind of struggles with school and so forth. So I thought that that song made a lot of sense. Check out the whole thing. And last time we talked about some of the amphetamines. We went over mixed amphetamine salts like Adderall, and we went over dextroamphetamines such as dextrin spancels. And we're going to continue with the other two types of amphetamines: Lisdexamfetamine, otherwise known as Vyvanse, and then we're going to talk about the amphetamine base um, products. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start off with Lisdexamfetamine. Um, this is FDA approved for adults and children with ADHD, and it's also approved for adults with binge eating disorder. So when we talk over in the obesity medicine season that I'm doing, I will talk about lisdexamfetamine again. It is the only product that is FDA approved for binge eating disorder, and I've actually found it pretty useful for this. And I've seen it work pretty well with weaning people off of GLP-1s that don't want to be on the GLP-1 for weight loss long term, especially if there's a little bit of ADHD going on. Hey, makes a lot of sense. So that's another use of this medication. And it's got the same black box warning, abuse, misuse, and addiction as all the other medications. So, what makes lisdexamfetamine different? Well, it's a prodrug, which means that it's not active. It's not an active drug in the form that you take it. And so what happens is it's inactive when you take it, and it's converted to the active dextroamphetamine in the blood. All right. So why is it called lisdexamfetamine? So it's actually the official full name is lisdexamfetamine dimesylate. So that's like the salt form, right? So it's got your dextroamphetamine, and we've talked about that, right? We've got levo and dextroamphetamine. We talked about kind of the difference that dextro's got a little bit more dopamine, and the levo's got a little bit more norepinephrine, and kind of that the combination is often helpful for ADHD. And so this is a product that's only giving you the dextro. However, the dextro is, for a lot of people, they find that the most useful. And so to have kind of a pure Dex product is often preferred by a lot of people. And I think, a lot of people think maybe, oh, this is just like Adderall. It's like a long acting amphetamine, but it is different because remember, Adderall mixed amphetamine salts is a 3-to-1 dextro versus levo. And this doesn't have any levo in it. So it's going to give a different effect, even though it is a similarly long acting product. Also, the way it works as a long acting product is different. All right. So, as I mentioned, it's dextroamphetamine, and it's chemically bound to L-lysine. All right. So there's actually a covalent bond. For those that remember chemistry, we've got ionic bonds, covalent bonds. The ionic bonds dissolve in water and they kind of separate, but covalent bonds are strong bonds. You have to have a chemical reaction to cleave that bond, right? And we need that lysine, um, which is an amino acid, which is an inactive substance. It's just kind of on there, right? We need that cleaved off in order to activate and release the dextroamphetamine. All right. And that's done in your blood. So you actually have enzymes in your red blood cells, and they perform functions for the cell. And I guess they actually were able to engineer this drug in order to have an enzyme that's already present naturally in our red blood cells that are doing something else for the cell's function, and then they come into contact with the lisdexamfetamine, and that enzyme cleaves this lysine group off, activating the dextroamphetamine. All right, so it's kind of a cool mechanism of action by which this becomes a long-acting product. So as you can imagine, what's going to happen is it's got a bit smoother transition, right? So it's not all activated at once. The drug is absorbed kind of steadily, and then it comes into contact with red blood cells steadily, and then it's released steadily. Okay, so what are some properties? So first, the dose, 30 to 60 milligrams. Um, the way that this equivalents work is a bit different. So about 25 milligrams of lisdexamfetamine is equivalent to 20 of methylphenidate or 10 of mixed amphetamine salts. So that's because, one, we've got the pure dex in there that we have to account for, and then we've also got the heaviness of that lysine. So like 25 is equivalent to 10 because that lysine is taking up some weight of the pill. All right. So, but when you work out that math, the max dose of 70 milligrams is roughly equivalent to only 28 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. And as we know, the max dose of mixed amphetamine salts is between 40 and 60 milligrams, depending on how you want to think, is ADHD versus narcolepsy. We had this discussion last time, right? But 28 is actually much lower than that. So you might be thinking, wow, I mean, if I have a patient that actually needs a higher dose, I might not be able to use this. And I've actually tried to give folks more than 70, and the pharmacy will not do it. Not mine. They just wouldn't do it. They wanted some papers that showed it. I found papers that said that showed it used in like almost 200 milligrams, and I actually convinced them one time to do it, and then they were like, wait, we're not doing this anymore. And so I was like, all right, forget it. They'll go off label to higher doses on some of the other ADHD products, but like in my experience, I had a hard time going above the 70 milligrams in this particular product. All right, but there is some good news. So despite the fact that this dose is actually relatively lower, lisdexamfetamine lacks the peaks of mixed amphetamine salts, where some of the dose is wasted, right? So if you look at the curve, mixed amphetamine salts has, and when I talk about peaks, I'm talking about kind of the concentration of the medication in your blood over time. And so if you got like your XY axis going on, right? So on your X axis is time, and then on your Y axis is the concentration of the drug in your system. And so with the mixed amphetamine salt, just kind of the way that its IR and XR little pellets are released, you get kind of a burst of release. So it kind of peaks higher, like the concentration goes higher and then drops. So like over a short period of time, it kind of goes up and down real fast and then is a little smoother. And then the next, like the XR gets released and you get kind of a more peak. But because of the way the red blood cell hydrolysis releases the lysine from the dextroamphetamine and lisdexamfetamine, you don't get those peaks. And so that actually preserves more of the medication, if that makes sense. So think of it like those peaks is in the mixed amphetamine salts, you're releasing more product over a very short period of time. So you're not really necessarily getting to benefit from that dose of the med. So the 28 milligrams kind of having a smoother curve without those peaks, the dose ends up being kind of similar. So if you look at the curves on top of each other, the kind of average concentration in the system over time is very similar, even if it's a lower dose. So I hope I explained that to a point where you understand it. And now you're thinking, oh, well, maybe I actually don't need higher doses. So it's available as a capsule, and then it actually came out as a chewable as well. However, the capsule can be dissolved in water. So if you can't swallow pills or your child can't swallow pills, you can open it and dissolve it in water and they can drink the water. And so it it doesn't taste that bad. It's pretty easy to do. The chewable's available now, so you don't have to do that, but it still retains that long acting effect because of the way that it's released into the system. So we don't need the IR/XR pellets and worry about crushing those. I mean, this is all powder, but it's long acting because of like how it's activated. All right. It's time to peak 3 to 4 hours. It takes maybe a little bit longer to kick in, maybe not, just because of how it works. You're not going to get that immediate IR release as much as you do with some of the other products. So you might not notice that like quick onset. It's more of a gradual onset. Duration is around 8 to 14 hours. It's approved for those age 6 and up, and it is generic now. That happened in the last couple of years. I can't remember if that was last year, but this is generic now. So hopefully the price is going to be going down. All right. So that's our only Lisdexamfetamine product, Vyvanse. All right. So it's kind of unique in that. Next, we're going to talk about the amphetamine base, and like I've tried to figure out like what this base thing means and how it's different from like mixed amphetamine salts. And the salts are, you've got kind of an ionic bond between either the levo or the dex amphetamine with another ion, like what was it, like saccharide and aspartate. Let's go back here and just figure out exactly what those were. So yeah, saccharate, sulfate, another sulfate, and aspartate monohydrate. And those are like inert substances that we don't really care about. I'm not sure why, and I've tried to look into this. Why are there some sulfates and some saccharate? Like why is there a dextroamphetamine sulfate and a dextroamphetamine saccharate? What's the difference here? Why not just have it all sulfate? I wish I could tell you. If anyone knows out there, leave a comment and tell me why we need sulfate, saccharate, and aspartate monohydrate, and we can't just use all the same. I have not been able to figure this out. But with the base, you don't have that. It's just like the pure amphetamine. And once again, I'm not really sure what this does for us, because your mixed amphetamine salts, they release that saccharate or whatever other piece, which does nothing anyway when it dissolves in water. So like you end up with the same product anyway. So I'm not really sure like what difference it makes that this is like just the base amphetamine without the salt. And remember, salt is not sodium chloride, so this is not something that's going to be like taste salty or have some sort of health implication with having like sodium. When we think of salt, we're talking about salt in the chemical form where you have like a positive ion mixed with a negative ion, which is what sodium chloride is. So we think that's table salt, but there are other salts. All right, so these amphetamine bases are not salts. So these are approved for adults for ADHD and narcolepsy, and for children for ADHD, narcolepsy. And then Evekeo is also approved for exogenous obesity in children, and we'll talk about that on the obesity medicine podcast. So essentially, this can be used. I mean, exogenous obesity, that just basically means obesity. I don't know why they have to add the exogenous. Why are we going to have endogenous obesity that we're like going to differentiate it from? Essentially, if you've got an obese child, Evekeo is approved for that, but I believe it's 12 and up only. But for ADHD, it's from 3, actually. All right. So all these products, unlike the dextroamphetamine, which only the patch was approved for adults, all of these products are approved for both. All right, and it's got the same black box warning: abuse, misuse, and addiction we've talked about before. So let's talk about our first one, Evekeo, which is amphetamine sulfate, which I don't know. This sounds like a salt to me. Once again, I'm confused. How is this an amphetamine base? I tried to figure this out. It's got the sulfate on there. How is this not also a salt? It wouldn't be a mixed salt because we don't have different salts. It's only sulfate. So I don't really understand the difference here. What does it matter that this has got sulfate versus doesn't have aspartate or whatever in it? Like, is that mix of those two salts different than just having one of them? Um, I tried to, like I said, tried to figure it out. So we've got regular Evekeo, which came out in 2012, and then Evekeo ODT, or oral disintegrating tablet, 2019. So there's all different types of pills you can take. You've got capsules, which are like the plastic stuff filled with like either beads or powder. You've got tablets, which are like kind of the hard, but they're hard like medicines that are like kind of compacted, which is like what you're probably used to taking most of the time would be either a tablet or capsule. And you might be wondering, like, why do sometimes we have medications as capsules and sometimes as tablets? Because, like, other formulations of medication, you can kind of understand why we would have those. But tablets and capsules kind of seem like they have the similar purpose. So, I was wondering the same thing. So I did kind of a quick Google search and I thought I would just like give you the answer. So each one might have some various advantages that might make it more preferable for the drug manufacturer on a particular medication in a particular situation. So capsules are easier to swallow. Um, they can mask the taste of a really bad tasting pill, whereas if it's in tablet form, it could dissolve a little bit in your mouth and you could taste it. You can hide that more with the capsule. Of course, the capsule's with the plastic cover on it, right? Capsules are often faster absorbed and have higher bioavailability. Um, they can hold other kinds of ingredients, so not just powders, but also like liquids and semi-solids. So you've got more options in like beads and things like that. If you need the beads, that can go inside of a capsule. And we talk about like why beads are important with like the different types of extended release products and things like that. And then if you've got certain kinds of ingredients that are really sensitive to light and air and moisture, that capsule can help protect it. So depending on like the chemical structure, you might have an advantage of the capsules. And so you might be wondering, wow, capsules are amazing. Why isn't everything a capsule? So tablets are cheaper to make. So if you're trying to save some money and you don't need the capsule, it is cheaper. They tend to have a longer shelf life. They're more stable. So, they last longer. There's more flexibility in dosing because you can put the scoring on there, so if it's like, oh, this is one where we want to have people have the ability to cut them in half or something, you can't do that with a capsule, right? And then um, also you can make them in immediate release, chewable, and oral disintegrating. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then there's also the option of having higher doses. So you can actually fit more product in a compressed tablet because it's more compacted than you can in a capsule because it's looser. So I hope that kind of gives you some information maybe you didn't think about. It's like, oh, that's why something sometimes is a capsule and sometimes is a tablet. They're taking those factors into consideration. Then you've got these ODT, oral disintegrating tablets. So these are ones where you basically just put them in your mouth, and they dissolve, and you don't have to swallow them or anything. They dissolve, and you get the medicine. We use these a lot with like some antipsychotics. If patients are like cheeking meds, or we don't want to give them a shot, but we want to make sure they get the medication, we give them an oral disintegrating tablet. So that would be like Zyprexa or Risperdal. Um, Dang it, I forgot the ODT Risperdal, what it's called, but it's like kind of like Zyprexa, and you've got Risperdal, the ODT version. So those are some ones that we might use ODT for. So this would be for folks that like have difficulty swallowing. And then of course you've got liquids, and then you've got chewables. And I don't think there's a huge difference between like ODT, chewables, and liquids. They're all products that you don't have to swallow. They're just like, some people might prefer a liquid versus a chewable. I mean, liquids can be kind of cumbersome if you've got to like have pour out the liquid and measure it. but then that can also have benefits because you can like adjust your dose more precisely. Like, oh, I'm going to take 3 milliliters versus 4 milliliters. So you have a little bit more control, but also like you lose some consistency with that. And then you've got to worry about pouring it. And then, say you want to take your medication on an airplane and you're limited to like, 3 milliliter, um, bottles of shampoos or medicines or whatever. So like, um, th- there's benefits and pluses and minuses to dealing with liquids. Um, a liquid bottle may not have as much medication in it. Like it may not last as long. Like if you're on a big dose, um, certain bottles it may only have like 10 days worth of supply in that bottle, and then it's like, oh, but the little pill bottle we can put like 60 days, 90 days in there and fit it in one tiny little bottle. So like, I think of liquids as, other than the being able to titrate them, um, I think of them as kind of a pain to deal with. Um, the difference between ODTs and chewables, I'm not really sure. Like, I think of ODTs like the big advantage of like, if someone like doesn't want to take it, and as long as you get the ODT in their mouth, they pretty much can't spit like it's going to dissolve before they could like try and spit it out. So if you're like having a difficult time getting somebody to like take and swallow something, an ODT may be a good option for you. So like, say you're giving this to a child, and they may not be trying to be obstinate or whatever. They just might be joking around and be like, oh, I'm going to put this chewable in my mouth and then I'm going to spit it out later and no one will know. you know um, the ODT, you're not going to have that issue. Okay. And then patch is like the other kind of formulation I think about. And like, you could stick a patch on someone and they may not notice it, or someone may know it's there and they might take it off early, and then they're not getting the medication after that. So these are kind of some differences. Like, you've got basically the ones that you have to swallow versus the ones that you don't have to swallow. And then even the ones that you have to swallow, oftentimes you can like sprinkle those on food or dissolve them in water and things like that, but they might be a little bit better. I mean, you can even actually chew stuff that's not supposed to be chewed. And it's because it has a really bad taste and people don't want to taste it or deal with like the little bits of chewing, like this hard tablet or whatever. Um, and so, and sometimes liquids are flavored or chewables are flavored and things like that. So those are some of the differences there. So with Evekeo, you've got the tablet form and you've got the ODT, oral disintegrating tablet form. All right. Onset of action about the same as all of our other meds, 20 to 60 minutes. Time to peak, 4 hours, pretty similar. Duration of action, 4 to 6 hours. This is a short acting product. That's why it's approved for 3 and up. Remember, we don't like to use long acting products in those under 6. There was that recent warning the FDA put out on that. Can you split it? Yep, because I mean, because it's short acting, that's just makes it easy to where you could like split it or chew it or dissolve it or whatever. Um, the one cool thing about Evekeo is it's got that approval for exogenous obesity. And the other, so like, I try to explain like, oh, what's the difference between these medications, right? Um, well, one big difference is this one can be used for under 3, um, and it can be used for exogenous obesity, and I believe 12 and up for that though. And then this one, remember we've got our dextro product, which is just pure dex, and then we had our mixed amphetamine salts, which is a 3-to-1 dex to levo mix. And then we had our Lisdexamfetamine, which is also a pure dex. Well, this one is a 1-to-1 dex versus levo. So I would say the one cool thing about Evekeo is our only 1-to-1 product. And so if you've got a patient that like may respond better, like versus a pure dex versus a 3-to-1 versus a 1-to-1, maybe having, you know, this one has got your highest ratio of norepinephrine in it. So that might help certain patients. Remember, we talked about the difference between what dopamine and norepinephrine have effects with the ADHD. You may have some patients that, they need a little bit more of that norepi quality. And so this may be a good option. In fact, it's your only option. All right. But the downside of this medication is it does not come in a long acting form. All right. So we do not have the benefit of long acting. We'd have to take it twice a day. And so I actually forgot about dosing. For 3 to 5, it's 2.5 milligrams in the morning. And it's actually only approved in the tablet, not the ODT form for that age group. Not sure quite why that would be, but I mean, honestly, we probably shouldn't be giving these products to kids 3 to 5 anyway. That's kind of like been in the news a lot lately of like we're giving too much of these medications to kids under 6 anyway, even if it is a short acting product. And then it didn't, the prescribing guidelines don't really say anything else other than 2.5. So it's just 2.5 to what? Like, can we increase this? I'm not sure. But like, I'm not giving 3 to 5 year olds medication. So not something I have to worry about. Those for 6 and older, the dosing range is 5 milligrams once a day in the morning to a max of 20 milligrams twice daily. And because this is a 1-to-1 product, the equivalency is a bit different. So the dose equivalent of 15 milligrams is equivalent to 20 milligrams of methylphenidate or 10 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. So whereas, this is an amphetamine product, it's not equivalent to 10 milligrams to 10 milligrams. It's 15 of this is equivalent to 10 of mixed amphetamine salts. And that's pretty much because mixed amphetamine salts is 75% dex, and this is only 50%. And so to kind of round out that equivalency, you have to take a bit more of this to be equivalent to that. But once again, you're getting a different ratio. So these like kind of equivalencies can be a little bit challenging, but it's good to have kind of a rough idea, because if you're switching a patient from one medication to another, you kind of want to know roughly how much should I give. And it's not going to be like the same amount. Oh, they were on 10 of this, so I should give them 10 of this. Well, maybe not. All right. Or you could, but kind of expect that it might, if you're switching from 10 of like mixed amphetamine salts to 10 of this, expect that it might not be as effective. All right. So is this product generic? Regular Evekeo is. The ODT is actually not going to be generic until 2037. I actually just like decided that once I get through all the meds, I want to do kind of like a pricing guideline, because it's like I tell you, like, oh, I try to stay away from the branded products that are not generic yet. But I've looked up some of these. Some of the generics are expensive too. Some of them aren't. Like a mixed amphetamine salt IR is like less than $1 a pill. But then you get like some of these are like $18 a pill. And so it's like a really wide range. The average is around $7 or $8 a pill. And so and even with some of the unbranded generic products, they might still be like $10. And so you can't really go based on whether it's generic or not, because a lot of the generic products, just because of the technologies used in some of these products, is still a little bit difficult to produce. They still might be kind of costly. So if you're kind of keeping an eye on healthcare costs, it can be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to do like a breakdown of that at the end, I think. I need to put that together first, though. All right. If you look at the curve on Evekeo, it peaks really quickly and then drops off. Kind of the slope that it drops off by is kind of steep when you compare it to a lot of other products. They kind of like come on more slowly and then round off. This one kind of hits pretty hard and then like drops relatively faster. But once again, the graph they gave here, and this is from the company that I got from their fact sheet, it shows like a pretty long time, like 12, 24, 36, 48, 60 hours. So I think it makes the curve look a lot steeper than it actually is. Unfortunately, like they all use different kind of lengths of divisions between like the concentration of drugs and the time. So if you look at one and be like, oh, wow, this looks like it peaks really hard. Well, that's because the times are shrunk down a lot less. I mean, like you've got like this tiny piece for 12 hours. Um, and so, yeah, it looks like, whoa, it shoots on, but really it's not that bad. So it kind of looks that way, but I would say it might not be. But once again, this is a short acting product. So that is kind of how they do tend to like have a faster onset and a faster offset. All right. So the next product I'm going to talk about is Amphetamine ER. So remember, mixed amphetamine salts is an XR product, but this is amphetamine ER. So like once it becomes generic, which it's not, that's what it will be called, amphetamine ER. But it is brand name Dyanavel XR. So I find that kind of confusing how its generic name is amphetamine ER, but then its branded name is XR. So that can be that might confuse you. So if you see amphetamine ER, we're actually talking about Dyanavel XR. We're not talking about Adderall. We're not talking about any of the other long-acting amphetamine products. Amphetamine ER is Dyanavel. Um, I always call this Dynavel, but it's not Dynavel, Dynavel. It's Dyanavel, Dyanavel. I feel like they should have called it Dynavel. Isn't Dynavel easier to say than Dyanavel? I feel like, don't you want to make it a smaller, a shorter? I don't know. I would have called it Dynavel. So this came out in 2015, and it's dosed 2.5 milligrams to 20 milligrams once in the morning. And this originally was a liquid product only, but now we have a capsule as well. And so it's in the liquid form, it's 2.5 milligrams per milliliter. So that's something you need to be aware of when you're dosing a liquid product, is milligrams per milliliter. Its dose equivalent is a little funky, 6.25 milligrams to 20 milligrams of methylphenidate, or 10 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. So 6.25 to 10. The max dose of 20 would be equivalent to 32 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts, which I think is a decent dose, but sometimes we go higher. So you wouldn't be able to do that with this product. You're maxing out at an equivalent of about 32 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. As I said, this is a liquid, but it's a liquid XR. And they actually have patented the term liquid XR, LIQUIXR, as like, that's with no space, liquixr. This is a patented technology. I'm going to talk about how that works. So this is the first long-acting liquid that we've talked about, I believe. We've had some liquids, but this is a long-acting liquid. And then later, this was 2015, it came out liquid, and then several years later, they came out with the capsule form. We'll talk kind of why that might be used. Onset of action is about the same, 20 to 60 minutes, peak about 4 to 7 hours, duration 8 to 13 hours, and they really emphasize this 13 hours. They kind of point out that most of the long-acting products go until 12 hours, but theirs lasts a little longer. All right, so my Deus is the one we've talked about so far that lasts the longest, up to 16 hours, because essentially it's like it's like taking 3 IR mixed amphetamine salts, right? It'd be like taking Adderall IR 3 times in one pill. That's what my Deus is kind of like. It's like it lasts about that long as if you had taken 3. But this one doesn't quite last as long as my Deus does, but it lasts a bit longer than the other ones do. So like an Adderall XR, it lasts about an hour longer, which may not sound like a big deal, but oftentimes with that product, we have to add an IR after it, do an XR plus an IR. With the Dyanavel, you shouldn't have to use this extra IR. And in fact, if you needed to, there's no like equivalent IR formulation of Dyanavel. You'd have to add like a mixed amphetamine salt IR if you needed to extend it, which then you're prescribing 2 different meds essentially, which can be I don't know, cumbersome, and the pharmacy might be like, why do you have two different types of stimulant? But the good news is you the whole idea with this product is that you won't have to do that because it does last longer. All right. And can you split it? Oh yeah, you can, because it's a liquid, 6 and up. And then it uses this liquid XR technology. And there's a few products that use this liquid XR. So there's some methylphenidate products, Quillavant uses it. So we're going to talk about like what's really cool about liquid XR here in a second. And then the ratio of Dex to Levo. And remember, this is a amphetamine base, product. So it's actually 3.2 Dex to 1 Levo. So pretty close to a mixed amphetamine salt. And it will be generic in 2030, so 38. So we've got a while to go before this product is generic. But let's talk about this liquid XR technology. So what you've got here is a liquid, and you've got some some IR particles, and some ER particles. All right. So once again, they call it liquid XR technology, but then they call the particles ER. Can we be consistent? E and X both mean extended release, right? The R is release. So IR is immediate release. ER is extended. So sometimes they abbreviate extended with an E, and sometimes they abbreviate it with an X, like extended, right? So, and then we'll run into more of these, and like CR, controlled release, that's not the same thing. There's DR, delayed release, so that would be like it's not released now, but it gets released. With extended release, it's kind of like released over an extended period. It takes a while before it's released, and the delayed release and the controlled release, they're all a little bit different. But the extended release is essentially it takes a while to eat through the coating, and then it gets released later. Versus IR, there's no coating, it gets released immediately. So in this liquid XR technology, you've got IR complexes, right? And so these IR complexes come into contact with positively charged exchange ions from the gastrointestinal fluid, displacing ions and releasing medication. So that sounds a little bit complicated, but essentially, basically, this stuff gets released when it hits the gastrointestinal tract. All right. The ER complexes are, they have coatings of variable thicknesses that enable a controlled release of medication through diffusion ion exchange. And if you look at the picture of this, so the ER essentially, you've got what's cool is with your most of our extended release products, you've got IR beads, which get released immediately, and you've got XR beads, which have an extra coating on it that get eaten through, and then they essentially are an IR bead with an XR coating on top of them, and then they get released. So it's like one release, two release, and then sometimes you have like a triple release where it's got like an X. Some I don't think we've got to them yet, but there's a bead where it's got like two medications in the same bead, and it's got like it eats through one coat and then releases some meds, and then it goes through another coat and then releases some more med. And so you've got some IR that gets released immediately, and then you've got like eat through a coat, med, eat through a coat, med. And then you've got Concerta, which is kind of cool, where like the outside of the pill itself is medicine, and then you've got two chambers in there, and one gets blown out a tiny little laser drilled hole, and then another one gets released a little bit later. So it's like a triple release. But with this liquid XR, it's not like you have one released and then later another one released. You actually have remember, it's variable thicknesses. So you've got like this complex of med, and it's got a coating on it. But unlike most of these meds I'm talking about, where you have XR, where they all have the same thickness of coating on them, and then they all get released at the same time, with this liquid XR technology, the coating is actually of variable thicknesses. And they actually say an infinite amount of thicknesses. And so you essentially have some particle with a tiny amount of thickness, and then one with a tiny bit more, and 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 kind of like, I mean, it's not really infinite, but you've got probably millions of these particles in there, and just a very gradual amounts of thicknesses. And so they're going to get released not all at the same time. It's going to be gradually. It's going to be this one gets released, and then this one gets released, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one, because they have like one's thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. Okay. So I think that's what makes this really cool. And it's also why a lot of patients like this product, right? This product, in addition to having that extra hour of duration that it takes to act, it also has probably the smoothest like onset and taper. And so you're less likely to have that abrupt kind of like the medication all wears off at the same time, because when you have like all the beads released at the same time, they all wear off around the same time. And so with this one, because they're released over a variable period of time, they last the same amount of time once they're released. But since they were kind of, this one was released second one, and this one second two, and this one 1 minute and 4 seconds, and this one, 2 hours, 2 minutes and 2 seconds, right? So like every second, you can almost think of every second, another particle is getting released of drug. And then they act the amount of time that they're going to act, and then they will then slowly taper off. Okay, this one's all used up, and then the second later, this one's all used up, and the second later, this one's all used up, right? So you get probably the smoothest curve with this Dyanavel XR that you're going to have with pretty much anything. And that's what patients really like about it. Because remember, I talked about adding the IR to extend the life of the med in the system. You also sometimes use that IR to help with that withdrawal of the med coming out too fast. And with this product, you actually avoid that. Now, it is a little bit more expensive, and so we have to take that into consideration. But I mean, I have some good stuff to say. Like, I would say that this is probably, like, if you're looking for like what's patients like the most, this is probably one of the products they like the most, because I always have a lot of patients, they love Vyvanse, and one reason why is because of the way it's like released with the enzyme activity. It's pretty smooth, but it's not as smooth as this one is, and so it's smoother than a lot of the other products. And then it's also pure Dex, and a lot of people just like that pure Dex. I mean, in my personal experience, most patients like Vyvanse more than anything. But I've never given patients Dyanavel because, in the, like I said, in the military, we have like our insurance system is very careful about what we're prescribing. And it's like, no, you have to prescribe the cheaper stuff. We're not letting you do this one. So do I have personal experience with this? No. But I have read patients' accounts. I've read how it worked. I've listened to other doctors talk about how their patients responded to it. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a personal account of like how I've personally seen it work in patients, but I'm doing the best I can because the system that I was in, I couldn't use all these meds. And everyone out there, you guys know that I have a little bit of bias against stuff that costs more. And I think, if it costs 3 times more as something else, and we add that up to more and more patients. I mean, I looked this up recently. The US healthcare system spends over $12,000 per person per year, which is like almost double every other country on earth. Only Switzerland comes close at 8,000 per person per year, and most other European countries are around 6,000. Asian countries tend to be between 2 to 4,000, and that's like Taiwan and Japan that have like really good healthcare systems. We're not talking about like China or something. All right, so which only spends a few $100s per person per year. The U.S. spends way too much money. One reason why is because our drugs cost too much, and because doctors are prescribing patients meds that cost more. And if you prescribe something that costs 2 to 3 times more than another product and it's only a tiny bit better, and you give that to all your patients, that's going to cost the healthcare system a ton of money, which means insurance premiums go up, which means that government spending and debt goes up, and it causes all these other problems, right? So I feel like if you can avoid that, you should avoid it. That's just, that's my personal opinion. Um, However, if you got a patient that essentially can't tolerate another medication because of that, and they can tolerate this one, and it's the difference between them being able to take medication and not being able to take it, then I think that the benefit outweighs the risk. You go with the more expensive product. Um, and if you've got someone who like it just maybe they can take the cheaper product, but after a while of taking it, they just can't deal with whatever difficulty they're having with it. Um, I've heard doctors say, "Oh, you don't have to use the extra IR at the end of the day, and this is great for patients." And I'm like, is that really that important? Especially in an adult that like, oh, they might forget to take the extra IR, and it's like, so what then? I mean, we don't have to treat ADHD, right? Like, it's not imperative. You're not going to die. Well, in some search, I don't want to say that you could get in a car accident because you're not focusing or whatever, but like, I have not met an adult patient who like does not take their ADHD medication. Like, it's like they want that extra dose. It's like if I give them the extra IR at the end of the day, they don't forget to take it. They're not like, whoops, I forgot it that day and then I got in a car accident. I just don't see that. And so you get these doctors say, oh, it's great that this lasts longer. We don't have to do the extra IR. Or we don't have that withdrawal, so we don't have to do the extra IR. And it's like, these are adults, and every adult I've ever met that takes ADHD medication likes taking it. Kids, not so much, but adults, I just don't meet adults that are like, oh, I hate my ADHD medication, unless they're on Strattera. Right? If they're on a stimulant, they typically like taking it. I mean, I'm sure there must be folks out there that are like, oh, I have to treat my ADHD, but I really hate my meds. They might be out there, but I don't think I've ever encountered one. I've been able to use the cheaper products quite easily with my adult patients and have not had to like be like, oh, I need to use one that's, even smoother than Vyvanse and lasts even longer without adding an IR. Um, I'd say in an ideal world, everything equal, cost equal, I like Dyanavel. I mean, I like my Deus because in my adult patients I tend to need a little bit longer, and I like Dyanavel. Have I ever prescribed either one? No, I have not. But I think they're both great products. But if they're going to cost 2 to 3 times more, and I can find a workaround and patients are fine with it, and we've saved the healthcare system millions of dollars, then I think that's a win. All right. But if for whatever reason you can't, then these are good options. And with kids, I think the challenges are going to be, you're going to have more challenges because with adults, I just don't see the tolerance issues so much with adults. They tend to like taking their meds a lot more. Kids tend not to. And so, and the thing is, the kids really often need these. They need them more than the adults do, right? Because adults always have that check in the back of their head of like, oh, my forebrain is more, my cerebral cortex is more evolved. I can actually stop and think and make a better decision. They're less impulsive. And with kids, they just haven't developed that. And so I personally think it's a lot more important to treat ADHD in kids. And like, this is a critical time where they're learning. And if they miss out on that learning of that school stuff, that could set them back, a lot for the future. Once you're an adult and you've already got that information into your head, it's less important. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's less important than it is for kids. And what I've noticed in kids is that they do tolerate these medications less well, and they don't like and I've had this with my adult patients where they'll tell me when I was a kid I hated this med. And then I give it to them as an adult and they're like they have no problem with it. And so it just affects kids and adults more differently. And so I just I find that adults like taking it and kids off. Kids mostly do not like taking any kind of medication. Kids just don't want to take meds at all. They hate it. And adults are much more on board. You got your adults that don't want to take meds, and it's like, they don't have to. They're adults. They can make their own decisions. If they don't want to treat whatever's going on, then that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. People think that doctors are drug pushers. It's like, oh, you need to take this. And it's like, if you have uncontrolled diabetes and you don't want to treat it and you understand the risks, that's on you, buddy. Like, um, I'm going to warn you, and I'm probably going to think it's a bad decision, but I'm not going to like force you to do it. Um, if you've got a psychotic patient who's not capable of reasoning, you're going to be in situations where you're going to force meds on them. But if you've got someone who can weigh their own costs and benefits and make their own decision, then that's on them. It may not be the best decision for them themselves or society, but like that's on them. But for kids, we have to make decisions for them, and they often don't want to take meds. And so if you've got a medication like Dyanavel that the kid prefers taking, and then that could be a really good thing. They're like, oh, they trying to get out of taking this other medication, and they don't want to take it, but like for whatever reason they tolerate this one better. Go with it. That's a time to go ahead and spend a little bit more money, because the investment of that kid getting the meds and having their ADHD treated and doing better in school and becoming a more productive member of society, that investment is going to pay dividends down the road. And so it's going to be worth it if using another cheaper product was just not going to like have that same effect, right? So we have to kind of think differently when we're thinking about kids versus adults versus adolescents, for that matter. And adolescents go until their mid 20s. So um, even though we would say like, I don't know, 18, 19, but really the brain is not, you're really not out of that adolescent stage until you hit around 25 to 27. So I talked a lot about Dyanavel. One more point with Dyanavel is that capsule is available now. So if you've got the patient that liked the liquid product, or maybe you need some flexibility, sometimes, the liquid, they talk about, say the kid needs it and they're going on a sleepover, and the liquid, it's hard, you can't hide that liquid, right? Or you're going on a trip where you want to pack your meds in your carry-on, because what if they lose your bags, and then you don't want to pack your medications and you're under the plane. Well, you can't really bring the liquid with you, so now you've got the capsule option, right? Or you want to hide it from your friends on the sleepover, right, for the kids, so they've got the capsule option. um, and so whereas I talked before, you've got that, the liquid though, the advantage there is like, hey, this is a day that I might need a bit more meds, so I'm going to take 7 milliliters versus, oh, this is a lower impact day, I'll take 3. And so like that's the really one of the huge benefits of having the liquid is like, if it's a higher or lower demand day, you can actually take like a lower dose, um, rather than not taking it at all. Say it's like a weekend, it's like, well, I don't want to not take it at all, but I don't quite need as much as I normally do. Well, you could take less, and it's a lot easier to titrate that yourself. Maybe you could cut a pill in half if you're taking a pill, but like it's hard to cut it any more defined than half. But with a liquid, you can be a lot more precise. Um, but then it's great that you can stay on the same drug, like the Dyanavel, if you needed to have a capsule for certain situations, right? And then if you just, some kids might start out on the liquid and they're like, hey, I can swallow pills now, I don't want to be like a baby, I don't want to keep taking this liquid, it's like taking cough syrup, and now I'm 15. I want to move over to the capsule. And so we have that option of staying on the same med. So these are kind of some situations where you might want to think about the liquid versus the capsule. So like that's what I try and bring you on the show. I try to break it down and tell you exactly what's unique about this product and how you can kind of use that uniqueness. So um, let's talk about our last product of the day, which is another amphetamine ER product. So a little confusing. Dyanavel is ER, but this is a different branded product, Adzenys. It's a weird one. Adzenys. It's like, who would know how to spell that? Adzenys. And we've got two Adzenyses, to make them plural. We've got Adzenys XR-ODT, so that would be an extended release oral disintegrating tablet, which came out in 2016. And then we've got Adzyenys ER, and that came out in 2017. And that's a liquid. All right. Okay, so this is dosed. It's kind of funny. So for 6 to 12 years old, it's the range is 6.3 to 18.8 in the morning. And from 13 to 7 years old, it's 6.3 to 12.5. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me on why the younger age has a max dose of 18.8, and then this adolescent age is maxed out at 12.5, and then for 18 and up, you start with a higher dose of 12.5, but max out at 18.8. So 6 to 12, you max out at 18.8, 13 to 17, 12.5, and 18 and up, 18.8. And I just double checked this, and this is what it says. Not really sure why. The dose equivalent, 6.3 milligrams is equivalent roughly to 20 milligrams methylphenidate or 10 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. The max dose is equivalent to 30 milligrams of mixed amphetamine salts. And as I mentioned, Adzyenys ER is a liquid, and XR-ODT is an oral disintegrating tablet. Same onset of action, 20 to 60 minutes. Time to peak, 5 hours. Duration, 8 to 12 hours. Pretty standard there. Can you split it? Yes. Liquid, you can very finely titrate. We talked about that. ODT can be split. This is for 6 and up. I think I made a mistake earlier when I talked about Evekeo. I said it was 3 and up. I don't believe Evekeo is approved for adults. So I think that's 3 to 17. I think I made a mistake on that. But it's a short-acting product, and so you're probably not going to use it in adults anyway, but I don't know why you couldn't. I don't think it would be dangerous or anything, but I don't know that you would want to necessarily. All right. So going back to Adzenys, it's also a 3 to 1, similar to mixed amphetamine salts of Dex to Levo, but it's base instead of a salt. And unlike Dyanavel, which had that cool, like, infinite number of thickness of coating to release the medication super smoothly, this is similar to the other meds we've talked about, where it's a 50% immediate release microparticles and a 50% delayed release microparticles. And so, but what this medication is unique in is this is our first long-acting chewable that we've talked about. And it is the only long-acting chewable amphetamine product. Methylphenidate's got one, Quilichew, but this one, it's kind of neat. You've got like this chewable caps, like chewable tablet, and there are immediate release and extended release microparticles embedded in it. And if you actually look at it, the immediate release are kind of a faint yellow, like a faint orange color, and the extended release ones are kind of like a more reddish color. And if you look at the chewable up close, it's got this spotty red and yellowy on it, but it kind of blends together to look orange, right? Because I mean, yellow and red mixed together to make orange, right? But if you look at it close, it's actually like made up of these little yellow particles and little red particles. So that's kind of interesting and kind of cool that it's chewable, long acting. And then the liquid long acting, I tried to learn more about this. It doesn't use that liquid XR technology where it's got the variable coatings. As far as I can tell, it kind of is similar to the chewable, where we've got 50% IR microparticles embedded in the liquid and 50% delayed release. And so it's not going to have as smooth of a curve as Dyanavel is. And the liquid product, interestingly, even though the liquid product came out in 2017, which was a year after the ODT, its patent has expired and it's now available as generic. However, the ODT, which came out a year earlier in 2016, its patent has not expired. And so it doesn't expire until 2032. And you may be wondering, why is this? And sometimes there's one product that we haven't talked about yet, I don't think, that its patent expires only a couple years after it was approved. So the way this works is it's based on the amount of time since they first asked for FDA approval. And so if they get FDA approval really soon, they're going to have a long patent life. But if the FDA rejects it over and over and over again, and then sometimes they like table it and like don't do anything with it for like 5 years, and then they come back, they're like, oh, I think we can get this approved, and then they try again. Um, it by the time it actually gets approved, it may only have a few years left since it was first submitted, and that's how the patents run out. And so basically what happened here was that even though the liquid product was, I guess, approved a year later, it must have been submitted for approval sooner. I'm not sure why it would not have been approved. I don't know what the issue was that held it up, but maybe they just like sent it in there and then didn't work on it and forgot about it and were working on other products that they produced, and then came back and were like, oh yeah, we need to put out this Adzyenys ER product. But they had already submitted it sooner, so its patent is expired. So that's something to keep in mind. And the other thing that I want to talk about would be like, and when I talk about each of these medications is when would you use it? And so for today's drugs, Vyvanse, I think Vyvanse Lisdexamfetamine is a great product. It's off patent. It's another thing I didn't talk about, that the fact that it gets cleaved by the RBC hydrolytic process makes it harder to abuse it. So if you crush and snort it, it's going to get released in the exact same speed, because that's the cool thing about lisdexamfetamine, is it only gets released as fast as the red blood cells allow it. And so it's not up to you. You don't get to crush it or snort it, or, it's not getting directly absorbed and into your system. You can't like crush that extended release part of it. I mean, the liquid XR would be similar. You can't make that release any faster. It's got these microparticles with these coatings on it, and you can't destroy the coatings. And so it's going to release the speed it's going to release. And so I really don't worry that much about abuse, but like, and people used to worry more about it than they do now. But when we used to worry about it more, and it's not like they can't be abused. Lisdexamfetamine was kind of marketed as hey, this product is harder to abuse because of the speed at which it releases. So I think the smoothness on that one and the fact that it's a pure Dex product is like kind of what makes that a good product. I've had a lot of good luck with it. And then you've got Evekeo, which it's got that approval for the obesity in children, which might be useful. And it's got the 1-to-1 ratio that kind of makes it a different, you're getting a little bit more norepi there. And so like that would maybe be the advantage with it. And then was it Dyanavel we talked about next? We talked a lot about that. It's got that really smooth action and a little bit longer duration of action. And so those would be some reasons to use that. But like, I've just been trying to like rack my brain on when I would ever use Adzenys. I've searched the internet high and low. I can't find anyone promoting its use. I've gone onto their website, and they just say, oh, and if you want to convert from Adderall XR, this is the conversion table. But it doesn't say why I would want to convert. Like, why is this different? They kind of say, hey, we were the first chewable long acting. And it's like, who cares? Like all of these products, like you can sprinkle Adderall XR and it's essentially acts like the chewable would, right? You act like, oh, you have to swallow this. Well, you don't have to swallow Adderall XR either. You don't have to swallow Vyvanse. And in fact, there's a liquid now, right? It was a liquid, wasn't it? No, a chewable. Sorry, it's not a liquid. So there's now a chewable Vyvanse, but you didn't have to swallow the capsule anyway. So like, oh, this is a chewable, big deal. We can pretty much pretty much every long acting amphetamine product can be not have to be swallowed. And so the fact that something is a liquid or a chewable doesn't really matter. With methylphenidate, that's not the case. A lot of those have to be swallowed intact. And so if you can't swallow, you can't split them, you can't open them. All right. So you have less options there. But with your amphetamine products, Not really the case. So the fact that we now have a chewable, I mean, is there somebody that prefers a chewable over a liquid? I could see that. Like I said, the liquids can be cumbersome, but like maybe they don't want to sprinkle it on their pudding or deal with that. They want to just chew it. I guess these patients must be out there, the ones that can't tolerate any type of ingestion of medication other than chewable. And for those patients, we have Adzenys. Um, why we need this liquid version, this Adzyenys ER, I don't know. I mean, the good news is it's it's off patent, so it might be a little bit more affordable, but it's not as good as Dyanavel. Remember, Dyanavel has that smooth, like variable coating, and we don't have that with Adzenys. So those are our two liquids, right? We don't have any more liquids. Evekeo is not a liquid. Um, Vyvanse is not a liquid. My Deus is not. Adderall isn't. So for long acting products, we do have some short acting products like Procentra, which is available as a liquid. Um, but as far as like a long acting product, you've got basically Adzenys and Dyanavel. And Dyanavel is just a way better liquid. I don't know, like perhaps Adzenys is cheaper. And so if you're looking for a more affordable liquid long acting product, that might point you in the direction of Adzenys. If you're looking for a chewable product, um, interestingly, they call the chewable XR-ODT. So it's an oral disintegrating tablet, but to me it looks more like a chewable. But remember, um, so it's kind of similar, right? Our other ODT was Evekeo, which is a short acting product, and this is a long acting. So that's cool. Um, so if you're looking for an ODT long acting amphetamine product, Adzenys is your guy. If you're looking for a long acting liquid amphetamine product that is a little more affordable or maybe covered by insurance, then the generic amphetamine ER Adzenys like product would be your guy. But if you're looking for a kind of a chemical reason why you would use Adzenys, I'm not sure what it is. It's 3 to 1. It's very similar to mixed amphetamine salts, being a 50-50 mix of IR to XR and a 3 to 1 dextro to levo. Same duration of action, same peak, same onset of action. Um, it's just very similar. And we don't need the liquid or the chewable ODT to get it for someone who can't swallow. We have lots of other options. And so I just don't see the use for Adzenys. If any, like this is like maybe the first product that I really don't see much of a use for at all. I mean, Evekeo, honestly, I don't see a whole lot of use for this, but like it does work a little bit differently with that 1 to 1. Um, my Deus is great because it's like a super long acting. Um, Adderall and Adderall XR, those are our tried and true. Those are our cheaper products. Those are the ones that like those are my bread and butter products that I use. And then with our Dextro Zellstrom, honestly, I don't see a huge need for this, but like if a patch is like Zellstrom is kind of like an Adzenys. Like if you're looking for a chewable or a liquid long acting, perhaps Adzenys is your guy. If you're looking for a patch, perhaps Zellstrom is your guy. But like um, I think there are advantages to patches. The fact that you can pull them off a little bit earlier or leave them on a little bit longer, and the fact that you're giving it to a kid and maybe they don't want to put anything in their mouth. I could see some uses for Zellstrom. I don't know why an adult would necessarily want to take it, but I'm sure there's some reasons. So I can see a little bit for that. Zinzetti, if you're needing a short acting Dex only product. Procentia, if you want a liquid version of that. Dextrogen Spancels, if you're looking for a long acting Dex and you don't want to use Lisdexamfetamine, which I probably would. I would probably not use dextrogen spancels, but I don't know, maybe it's more affordable. But now Vyvanse is gone generic, so we don't really have that issue. So I can see some need for each of our amphetamine products, but the need for Adzenys is probably the lowest. It's about the newest product, but no one talks about this. No one talks about this product. I've listened to so many ADHD lectures. No one really cares about Adzenys, as far as I can tell. But just keep in mind there, it's a long acting ODT and long acting liquid, but not as good of a long acting liquid as Dyanavel. But that brings us to the end of today's show, and that concludes the amphetamines. Um, I hope you guys found these 2 episodes on amphetamines, which are like medications that everyone should know about, useful. Maybe you'd never heard of some of these formulations. Maybe you thought, oh, wow, that is something that I could have used and I didn't even know it was out there. Or I'm a patient and I have that problem, and maybe that med would solve my issue. Well, I'm glad that you got that information. And we will talk about our other stimulant class, methylphenidate. I'll probably break that up into a couple episodes next time when we talk about ADHD. And I want to thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next time.